So I think we'll get started. Good day. So good to see you all. We have Lori-Beth Larsen with us today for our March already, Cultural Thursday. As the advertisements said, she's going to talk about having grown up in Papua New Guinea. I'm just going to quickly talk a little bit about her background. She got her music degree in ethnomusicology in Hawaii, and then went on to get her master's in TESOL, teaching English to speakers of other languages in St. Cloud. And now we're so fortunate to have her at Central Lakes College. I don't know how long you've been at Central Lakes College, Lori-Beth.
Yeah.
But we did talk about you having also taught in the K-12 system as well, and what a joy that is, because I have had that experience as well. So I'm going to go ahead and spotlight you. And if you get a chance to join us next month, we will have a speaker talking about Egypt. So I just wanted to put that plug in there right now. All right.
Thank you, everybody. So I grew up in Papua New Guinea. I also am fortunate to work at CLC. It's a really great place to work. I can't see the chat while I am doing this, but feel free to put your comments in and I will take any questions when we finish. I hope to leave a decent amount of time for questions at the end here. I said I grew up in Papua New Guinea. I'm going to share a screen. I might flip back and forth a little bit if you don't mind, because I have a few or two videos I thought it would be fun to watch here. So as I said, I grew up in Papua New Guinea. I wanted to mention at the beginning of this this presentation that I've done numerous presentations and a bunch of them via Zoom, and my daughter and I traveled through Southeast Asia, and we did a Cultural Thursday a few years ago, 4 or 5 years ago now. And this one has made me nervous. I've been feeling pretty vulnerable to talk about my home and growing up. And it made me aware to be, as I continue to attend Cultural Thursdays, to be aware of the vulnerability of somebody talking about their home. And again, I'm presenting on Papua New Guinea growing up there. So it's not necessarily an overview of the country of Papua New Guinea, but what my life was like, or what our lives were like growing up. Oro, welcome. That means welcome in Oro Kaiva, the language of the people we lived with in Papua New Guinea. This is our village, Sui. So this is what we looked at every day, our neighborhood. To begin, I'm going to switch over to a quick video. This video is one we found the other day, and I'm going to hope you hear sound on it.
It froze temporarily, but we're with you again.
Okay, sounds good. We'll head back then to the video. So if you want to know what was being said there, you'll have to ask my dad afterwards. That is the language that I grew up in the village. I'm going to show you quickly where Papua New Guinea is and where I grew up. So if I zoom out here a little bit, you can see Papua New Guinea is the second largest island in the world, north of Australia. And it's right here. Half of the island belongs to Indonesia and 1976, I believe. The village I grew up in is right there, very close to Papandetta. You can see it's on the Kokoda Trail. Some of you may have read about the Kokoda Trail. It was a very important trail going from Oro Bay on this side, right across to Port Moresby, the capital city. And numerous battles were fought there. I grew up in two places in Papua New Guinea. The other place was the SIL Center, the mission station, which was up here close to Goroka. Goroka was where my brother was born. And so we had two homes in both those places. That's where I grew up. So in 1971, my parents decided they were going to take me. I was 3, and my sister, who was 1, off to Papua New Guinea. Both my parents are teachers, and my mother is an elementary school teacher, and my father is an art teacher. And my father went back for also a master's degree in linguistics so that he could do translation in Papua New Guinea. We boarded a cruise and stopped in numerous places in the Pacific. This was a Halloween celebration on this fancy cruise. I was Little Bo Peep, and I'm not 100% sure if my sister Dawn enjoyed being my sheep, but she was. So we went to a village, settled in a village called Sui Village, and were adopted into the Hiroro clan. My father was from the Hiroro clan. This is his older brother, Leonard, and they worked together with Leonard's younger brother, a lot on translating the Bible and other books into Orokaiwa. And my mother was from the Jegasi clan, because of course you cannot marry within the same clan. Our neighbors, closest neighbors, were Leonard and Lot, and on the other side were Michael and Diana. Diana was probably the closest woman to my mother. You can see Diana and is teaching my mom to make etis, which is a bag, traditional bag from Papua New Guinea. So this is me in the pink and my sister Dawn with Leonard, and they're hanging out with us there. So as I was preparing for this presentation, we were talking about, so how did growing up in Papua New Guinea impact us? What kinds of things did we learn, and do we continue to learn? How did it influence our perspectives as adults? And I think the thing that bubbles right to the top, but mostly, is the current frustration due to the pandemic to crave adventure. I love being lost in a place where I don't know the culture, I don't know the customs, I don't know the language, and that is something that we all crave. We crave being in that situation. This is our home in the village. The first adventure, I believe, I remember was finding this.
Okay, I'm not sure. I'm assuming we still have the participants, but I don't see our presenter. Is that correct? Can someone share with me in chat? Hello, can you hear me? Can you? Okay. I'll have to see if maybe here she is. All right. We lost you for a moment there, but you're back, which is great.
So hang on, there we go. Now I'm not muted anymore. And I think I need screen sharing again, Tracy. There we go. They're doing okay?
Yes.
Okay. So I remember riding in PMVs. I remember waiting in airports. I remember finding breakfast in Tokyo. We were wandering around. I remember being pretty young. We were trying to find breakfast in Tokyo. We found this huge bowl of soup. Then we found a nightclub that was still open early in the morning, and they gave us a warm milk and cold eggs. So we put the eggs in the milk and warmed up the eggs and cooled down the milk, and then we had breakfast. So all kinds of really wonderful, strange adventures we had growing up. So I remember a lot of growing up very curious about the mystery at night. Sometimes just as the village was quieting down, people would have speeches. And I didn't always understand what was going on in the speeches, but Dad would translate them. And maybe they were talking about a conflict or things. I remember the mystery of feast days when everybody would disappear from the village to go out into the jungle and get prepared and to all dressed up. Orokaiva people were very well known for their dancing, for their colorful costumes, for their music, the music, drumming. And as we waited for everybody to come back to the village to dance, you could hear the drums beating in the jungle, and as they would enter the village, it was a beautiful, beautiful feeling. I remember the mystery of girls as they entered puberty, and they would enter this period of seclusion that may last weeks or months or years, and they would live in a home, in a house, and they wouldn't see any men, and they wouldn't see the sun. And so when they would come out to bathe or go to the bathroom, they would be completely covered, and you wouldn't see these girls for a long time. And they would bathe in coconut oil. Their skin would get very light, and tattoos, and there was always a mystery surrounding that. So that is a feeling that I very much enjoy, that mystery surrounding me, curiosity of life. My younger sister Gail and my brother were both born in Papua New Guinea. My sister Gail was born in a clinic next to our village, very close to the village. And she actually carries the name Ka Sui, Girl Sui, because she was born very close to the village. My brother was born in the Highlands in Goroka. That's my sister. My brother was born in the Highlands in a hospital in Goroka, and so they were both born there. Another thing I learned from growing up in Papua New Guinea was this flexibility of time and being adaptable, which was highly influenced by our growing up and traveling. So I would like you to imagine, if you would, not having a watch. And I'll take you through a little bit of our days. So we'd wake up in the morning, and you could hear the women begin to get up, and they would be cutting firewood, beginning to make fires, roast some bananas or kaukau, sweet potato, and for breakfast. And people would start, there'd be rumblings in the village, and then people would begin to leave and go to their gardens. Gardens could be like an hour's walk away, half-hour walk away. They would walk into the jungle, into their gardens. And then we would begin our days. And our days would typically consist of having breakfast, of course, doing a few chores, and maybe some playing. We learned to sew. This is a hand crank sewing machine. I learned to sew on this machine. This was we had lots of animals, always had a dog, some cats. This is a cuscus, a very friendly cuscus. He was with us for a number of years. And we would do chores outside. Maybe the ground was swept in our village. We had a little bit of grass around our house, but it was swept to keep the snakes away and other creepy crawlies that you don't want coming into your house. So we would do that. And my mom would teach us all, so she would prepare lessons, and as all the way through elementary school, she would give us lessons, and then we would do our homework. After we would do our schoolwork, we would maybe have lunch, and then of course we'd go swimming. And we would wash the clothes in the village, but we would swim every single day. And we'd run down to the river and we would swim. So none of that was controlled by time. My father told me a story of when he was working, Leonard would say, it's time for lunch. Dad would say, well, how do you know? Well, the sun is hitting the tree at that place. So it's time for lunch. So I grew up with a lot of flexibility in time. As an adult, I've tried to learn to keep time, to be on time more and more. But it is still something that I like the flexibility of time, not being controlled by time. We celebrated a lot in the village. This is something my parents were very, very good at. We had celebrations for everything. We celebrated dogs' birthdays, and we celebrated all different kinds of holidays from around the world. This was often our favorite celebration, was to go to this Ilimo River and have a picnic and spend the day hanging out. My sister celebrated once in the village. She participated in one of the feast dance days. They took her into the jungle and got her all dressed up, and then as they danced back in, she learned the steps. And so I grew up with a lot of celebrating all different kinds of things. This made us very creative. As I was talking with my sisters and my brother, I learned that, or I understood that we grew up not seeing just one right way of doing things, and we often challenge the status quo or the ethnocentric idea that there is one right way to do things. Became very sensitive to people from different cultures and different language backgrounds and different customs. So we're often asked, where are you from? And our experiences as third culture kids made us global citizens, as in we don't belong anywhere. The term third culture kid comes from having a culture of your passport, usually where your parents are from or where you were born, and then the culture that you're living in. But then there's a third culture that third culture kids create that is one it's sort of on top of everything else. This is a funny picture. We always talk about, my sister would get her ears pierced. This is how she got her ears pierced. Of course, it's just a comic picture. It's just silly. So we lived in two places in Papua New Guinea. I wanted to show you a picture of the food here just before I move into that. We would go into the town, Papundetta, once a week, and we would get our supplies, and then we would also get some salt and soap, and we would exchange those because we didn't have a garden. We had a coconut tree that somebody gave us, but we didn't have a garden. So we would exchange produce from the gardeners, and in exchange for salt and soap. And this is a bounty of garden produce. I'm playing soccer, playing with fire, or soccer. We also had a set of encyclopedias in our village house. And so one time we decided we would all learn how to be Girl Scouts and Boy Scouts. So you could say we had our caps, and we had badges, and we would get badges for lighting fires. We had an overnight camp out in our van in the village. This was the funnest. You could hear the rain coming from a long way away. So we would run down to the end of the village, and then we would wait for the rain and try and beat the rain back. But running in the rain was a wonderful thing. I am a pluviophile, meaning I love the rain. So as I said, we lived in two places in Papua New Guinea. We lived in the village, and we lived also in the highlands, the mission station in the highlands. So we would pack up all our things twice a year or more, depending on how often we went out to the village or how often we came back into the center. And we'd pack all our things and we'd take this little plane and it would take us to the village and it would take us back. This is at Ukarumpa. Ukarumpa is the mission station where we lived with the other missionaries. Some were support missionaries working on teachers. That the high school was there. There's an elementary school there, and so we lived in the highlands. I thought I'd just show you just this quick little video. This is landing. Landing in the highlands. I'm going to fast forward through a little bit of it. But it gives you an idea of what the highlands looked like. This is the center, SIL Center. Coming in for landing. A very familiar feeling. This is what it looked like. We were in the mountains. This is quite a bit cooler than our village was down in the lowlands, and this was in the highlands. This is our house in the Ukarumpa. Ukarumpa was the name of the center. So I grew up in my graduating class, had about 40 students, and there were about 14 cultures represented in that class of 40 students. You can see here I grew up with this, you could see as New Zealand and Australia and the United States and Papua New Guinea, and I believe he was from Germany. So many different cultures represented in my class. At some points in Ukarumpa, we stayed in a children's home when we were in high school. My sister and I stayed together in the children's home, and there were usually about 12, maybe 10, 12 other high school students who would stay in what they called a children's home with children's home parents, while our parents, if they were working in a village, would go out to the village. And my parents would go out to the village maybe for 6 or 8 weeks. We did learn independence from this a little bit, how to work on our own. We would communicate with our parents via radio. We had a scheduled radio conversation with them once a week, which wasn't necessarily private. Anyone could listen to what we were saying over the radio during that time. But my sister and I always stayed together, and I think we stayed in children's home 4 or 5 times. So it was my high school, and I wanted to talk just a little bit about being a third culture kid. Third culture kids tend to make friends very quickly because they often say goodbye. They say goodbye to people who are always coming and going. And but those deeper friendships that I have are the ones, my closest friends are probably the ones I grew up with in Papua New Guinea, because the experience is such a unique experience. 5 of these people in this picture is me and my sister, and actually my cousin, and 5 of these people in this picture graduated with me from high school. This is my high school graduating class. I grew up recognizing my privilege. I wanted to talk a little bit about the idea of poor missionaries. Mom and Dad were with a faith-based mission, so we would never really know exactly how much money we were getting per month. If we didn't have quite enough money, we maybe wouldn't get ice cream for a week. But we always had clothes and shoes and plenty of food. And I grew up actually feeling and recognizing that I was quite privileged. We had books, we played, we were involved in music, we were involved in drama. We, most of my, if almost all, if not most of my friends, the people I grew up with had parents with college degrees. And I had some very brilliant, very smart friends. We had access to music. I was in drama. I was in a traveling singing group. And again, this is my high school. So I grew up feeling quite privileged. I didn't grow up necessarily valuing money. I didn't actually even know that we were supposed to do taxes. When my sister and I lived in Hawaii, somebody had asked if we had finished our taxes, and we didn't even know what those were. And I should say also sorry to the CLC business office because I am not good at budgets. I very seldom have much money in my savings account. But I did grow up recognizing the privilege I have of having a very diverse education. Let's see, I'm looking at the time here. I don't want to go on too long. My parents and as I talk to my brother and sisters about this presentation and my parents, my brother mentioned the other day that growing up was such a unique experience. I don't always understand what it's like for my daughter to grow up in having an American growing up experience, or my nephew, because we had such a unique growing up experience. But I do value having two sisters and a brother and parents who share my experience with me. And I know some of them are on here. My one sister lives in Australia. She's sleeping, but she'll be watching the recording. So if you have questions, you're more than welcome to ask questions. Also, as I talked to my sister Dawn, I think bringing it back to the beginning, craving adventure is one thing that all of us experience pretty deeply, and is, of course, the toughest part of this pandemic for us, and not traveling. But I wouldn't trade my life for anyone else's. It was an amazing experience. And as I've gotten older, I've appreciated how close I am to my family, and the truly unique, privileged life I had growing up in Papua New Guinea. And of course, you have to end any speech with the sunset, right? I'm going to stop sharing my screen now and open it up for questions. I will open up the chat and the question and answer. It's very strange not to have any interaction with people, but I can see the question and answer, and I can see the chat now if you have any questions. Let's see, we have a question in the chat that says, what was my favorite thing about growing up in Papua New Guinea? Good question. My favorite thing was probably having adventures and celebrating consistently. The having picnics, going on airplanes, running in the rain, all those kinds of adventures um, were adventures that this question comes from my daughter, I should tell you, but those adventures, and I've tried to provide my daughter with some of those same adventures, and I know she's enjoyed them.
If you'd like, Lori-Beth, I can read some of the questions so you don't have to worry about keeping an eye on everything.
Oh, I don't mind now. I'm not sharing,
Okay.
so I can see them.
Okay, perfect.
And so I can do that. Thanks, Tracy. Let's see, I have not been back to my hometown, and I've seen some of my friends who, of course, are there all over the world now. Um, they're in Germany and Australia, and many of the friends I grew up with have, not from the village, but from Ukarumpa, have had lots of who have gone into jobs where they travel a lot. So as I've traveled around, I've been able to see some of them. My sister Dawn and her husband Jeff, they grew up together and got married. They brought their boys back to Papua New Guinea, and my sister Gail also brought her daughter back to Papua New Guinea. I have not brought Maritza back, but someday I will. I think there were a few times. The question is, was it ever dangerous living there? There were a few times that that we might have been in a little bit of danger, but not maybe 2 or 3 times, and that's a number of years. So no, it wasn't. Papua New Guinea has had some more conflict and a little bit has been a little bit dangerous more recently, within the last maybe 10, 15 years. Yeah. Good question about linguistic diversity. Yes, there are 860 languages within the very small population. It's a lot, well over 1,000 dialects. Um, some great questions here. What do I miss most? I don't know. That's such a great question. I think, what would my sisters and brother and I say? The the flexibility, the need for adaptability, the space, the space where you feel like time is endless. Um, the sun setting, the moon at night, and sitting in our veranda, and there's nothing to do. That's what I miss most. There's another question is, what do you think would be surprise people if they were to get off? The weather, it's very hot, very humid, um, and the smells, of course, smells of the village, maybe smells of the pigs, and maybe the friendliness, the welcome that you would often get, very, very welcoming. My parents returned to the United States when I graduated from high school. My sister attended Brainerd High School for 11th and 12th grade. I graduated from high school in Papua New Guinea. And then my sister and I went to the University of Hawaii, and my younger sister and brother went back with mom and dad for another 4 years, 3, 4 years. And so they had completed the translation of the Bible, and then they had finished their project, and we grew up. We came back here. We did come back twice. We came back twice on furlough. We came back when I was in second grade, and then we came back again when I was in seventh grade. And those are they're almost like blips in my growing up. They were tough years, but we did come back twice. Are there things I missed about growing up in the United States? I don't think so. I would have to say pretty quickly, I don't think so. When I was in the United States interacting with maybe my college friends, and they would refer to something that I didn't know, maybe pop culture or something like that. Then of course I think I felt a little bit out of the loop. And I think the experience of not living with people I grew up with, so I don't have friends who are living in the same town as me that I grew up with, sometimes that feels a little bit lonely, but I don't think I miss that too much. My parents are originally, well, my father spent some of his growing up years in Alaska, and then he spent most of the latter part of his growing up years in Fargo. And my mom grew up in Iowa and Chicago, and then Moorhead, and they met when they were in college in Fargo, Moorhead. We came back to Brainerd because we came to Brainerd partly because of the good school system, and my younger siblings were going to attend them. And yeah, let's see. Kolu, that's such a great question. I really did want my daughter to grow up in another country speaking another language. But we have had the privilege of being able to travel quite a bit. She has been to, what is it? Maybe 20 countries. And the first country she went to was Mexico when she was 1 month old. So we've been to a lot of different countries. When I studied, thanks, Dad. Dad's asking me a question. When I was studying ethnomusicology at the University of Hawaii, I did my senior project by going back to our village and studying children's music of our village. And I have some great videos that have not been yet converted to a digital video. And it's probably why I ended up studying ethnomusicology rather than going into a performance music degree or music theory. Let's see. Oh, so many questions. I actually don't speak other languages. I understand a little bit of Orokaiva, not very much. I understand a little bit of Tokpisin, which is what do you call it? Anyway, the language that's often spoken in Papua New Guinea, along with English. But one of my sisters speaks Pidgin pretty fluently. My brother and my brother-in-law speak fluently, and I think my other sister probably speaks more Tokpisin than me. And I studied Spanish, so I do speak Spanish probably better than any other language besides yep. So let's see. Let's see, the religion. So the traditional religion in Papua New Guinea is animism, a belief in a spirit world. But a variety of missionaries came to Papua New Guinea fairly early on. And so in our village, the Anglican mission was there for many, many years before us. So so Christianity probably is pretty prevalent now in Papua New Guinea. So my parents' work primarily was to do translation. So they translated the Bible into Orokaiva. And But they also did a lot of community development. And then eventually, as they finished their work in Sui Village, then they worked with community development. And so a variety of projects. My mom uh, wrote a dictionary. She did a lot of literacy work, language, reading and writing, and uh, things like various projects. What were some of the projects? Uh, Trees. Dad compiled a lot of knowledge about the trees that are in the village, and yeah. Let's see. I think my mom and dad might have to answer that. They can type some answers in the chat there if they think of any of those. So, are there schools in Sui Village? So there was a school nearby that some kids went to, not very many, an elementary school, and then the the high schools were often quite a ways away. There was a boys' school, um, and people came from all different places in Papua New Guinea to attend a boys' high school, and so that was a school that was close, and but not very many kids went to formal schooling. A few. I'm remembering this number 10, I think. So. Did my parents do any transcription of spoken languages? So Orokaiva, when we went, it was written. There was a transcript of Orokaiva, and um, so there was Orokaiva was written when we got there. I think that Dad and Leonard and Lot made some changes to it, but let's see. What made me get into teaching? Both my parents are teachers and my grandparents were teachers. So it was definitely not something I was going to do. I wanted a much more romantically adventurous lifestyle. I wanted to be a flight attendant. I wanted to be a musician. I wanted to be anything but a teacher, until I went back to Papua New Guinea once while I was in college, and they asked me to teach my brother's English class. And I loved it, and I just fell in love with teaching. So I finished my ethnomusicology degree. I wanted to be an anthropologist, yeah, you name it. And then after that experience, I thought I do want to go into teaching, but I wasn't sure whether it should be like teaching music and world cultures, or whether it should be like teaching English. And I ended up understanding that teaching English for speakers of other languages would be something that I probably would really like to do. And so then I went for my master's degree to do that. And I love it. I really do love teaching. My favorite part of teaching is connecting with students primarily. Oh, good question, Claudia. Was I able to see a lot of the country? We did not travel a lot within Papua New Guinea. We did a little bit on holidays. So every now and then we would go for a holiday. We did holidays in the capital city. We did a lot of holidays in Leh, another coastal town. And then we did some holidays in this place called Madang. And if you ever go to Papua New Guinea, you must visit Madang. It is absolutely beautiful coastal town with amazing beaches. It was amazing. So Dad answered a question here. He wrote a trees and vines book along with Leonard. They have a book with children's games. They have local stories, traditional storybooks and literacy books, and many more. Thanks, Dad. So when we traveled, we did have our own car. I'd say if I can remember, we had a truck in the village. There's those little small Toyota trucks, if you've ever traveled and seen them. We had a van, and when we would travel into the town, it was about an hour's drive. We would try and stand up the whole way. There's tons of potholes. There was no pavement. And so the rain would make these huge potholes, and then you'd have to try and stand up in the van without falling over as you bump through the potholes. Then we had a couple cars up on the SIL Center. In the SIL Center, we would drive to Leh or drive to Madang for holiday. But sometimes we would travel in public motor vehicle. And sometimes they were covered trucks, and sometimes they were uncovered trucks, and you traveled in the back of the trucks. And then, of course, when we would go from the SIL Center to the village, we would travel by that little tiny airplane. That's how we would travel around Papua New Guinea. That's a really great question about climate change. I just saw a very recent travel video on Vanuatu. Many of the islands that are around Papua New Guinea are disappearing due to rising ocean and climate change. I do know when I worked in Micronesia, there was a community that had that was no longer able to live on their island. So they had set up a community on Micronesia, a refugee camp sort of community on Micronesia, because their island has disappeared into the water. Madang, Madang, Madang. It's absolutely fabulous. Oh, we also traveled by boat. I did say that a couple times. We went down to the village by boat, and we would go by public boat. That was not always the most comfortable way to travel, but it sure was fun to travel by boat to the village. And that was, I think it was 16 hours to travel by boat. Let's see, what other questions do we have? 19 hours. Thank you, Dad. So nice to have them on here that they can answer some of these questions too. Yes, the white van in the photo did belong to our family.
This is fascinating. This is
It's
so
so fun.
fascinating. Oh, it's just wonderful. And I'm sure that we all have more questions that we could think of. They're just not coming to us right now, but it's nice that we have you all in the community that we can continue to ask your questions. Do you think you got ideas about homes and home building, just having lived in a culture, and how, you have to adapt for climate, growing up and seeing the variation between the countries, between the different parts of the country?
Yeah, I think so. My dad, along with other people, built the home in both houses, and he's very creative. Both my parents are unbelievably creative, and so when I brought the ideas from my home here, I live in a straw bale yurt here in Brainerd, and when I brought my ideas to them, they decided that was going to be okay, and we could try building a round house. So yeah, I think living within different kind of climates. My parents live 800 feet from me. My brother lives 1,000 feet from me. So we have a little community here, which has been absolutely amazing during the pandemic. Yeah. Did I answer your question, Tracy? I'm not sure. Yeah, in Brainerd, just outside of Brainerd towards Merrifield.
Yes, you did. Yep.
Oh, Oro Way. That's a great question, Dad. So we have, because now we have 1, 2, 3, 4 houses on our little driveway, we were allowed to name our street, and we called it Oro Way, which means, like at the beginning of my presentation, I welcomed you by saying Oro, and the song we listened to was Oro. Oro means welcome in Oro Kaiva. So our street now here outside of Merrifield is called Oro Way. It was difficult. That's a great question. It was tough. I'll answer that quickly. Tracy, we're running out of time. You just have to stop me when you need to.
I think we can take a couple more questions, and yeah, I will.
Okay. I'll keep looking at them and
Okay.
gabbing here away. It was difficult to return to Brainerd, and sometimes it is difficult, but there are a few things. Let me focus on the positives first. I absolutely love working where I work. Central Lakes College is such a wonderful, welcoming community, and I really enjoy teaching here. I really do. The school system has been really good with my daughter. It's been amazing to live 800 feet from my parents and 1,000 feet from my brother. We spend a lot of time together. We support each other. And as a single mom, it gives me a ton of flexibility. It's been really wonderful. It's difficult because I think of the again, that sense of adventure and sense of wanting to be somewhere that's mysterious, or that I'm curious about, where I don't know everything, is a very comfortable feeling for me. And here in Brainerd, I know a lot of the customs. I know a lot of the cultural background of the average person living in Brainerd. And we all speak the same language. So I think I feel a sense of a longing to be in a place where I don't know that stuff. So that's part of the difficulty. I really don't like the winter. I really hate it. But I'm used to it now. I have a great jacket. I have good boots. I know how to get outside, and I so I'm okay with winter now. But I do enjoy summers, and I've been very privileged to be able to travel a lot with my daughter, and that's been very good. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you so much. This was really fun. I appreciate your questions, and I appreciate the time I've been given to share a little bit about growing up in Papua New Guinea.
Thank you so much, Lori-Beth. It was absolutely fascinating. And now I have all sorts of questions I can ask you at work when we see one another again.
Please feel free.
I'm really miss seeing everyone. And I'm looking forward to seeing individuals and students in the hallways again. So thank you again. Thanks to
Thank
all of you
you.
for coming. This was recorded, so if you missed a part of it, we'll certainly make it available on YouTube. So thanks again. Take care.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone.